How's it going today, everyone? We got a S2000 that had some oil pressure issues the last time he was at the track. It's a AP1, so it's got the 2-liter F20C. And what I'm going to do now is get into doing some leak down testing to check the ring seal, the valve seal, and the overall just health of the combustion chamber. Then possibly cut the oil filter apart to eventually getting the engine out of the vehicle. So we'll start with, I'm just going to pull this intake out of the way, take the spark plug cover off, the coil pack cover off, pull the coils out, pull the spark plugs out, take a look at the spark plugs. I'm assuming they've been in there for a while, so they probably won't tell me too much. And I'm just going to do, like a step-by-step of how I'm doing this, step-by-step on what tools you need and stuff like that, and then just some overall observations of what I find. This is my first video that I'll be uploading to YouTube, so all the content going forward will be either on this build. So after we're done repairing the engine, we're going to make a turbo kit for it. We got a GTX 3076R that we're going to put on there. We're going to V-mount the radiator and intercooler on it. We got some fuel system stuff. We have a Haltech 1500 and a Haltech dash for it. And then a few other goodies, I think, as well. I think a Skunk 2 intake manifold, and then maybe some other pieces, some relocation stuff. We're going to try and keep the AC with the V-mount, which should be a little bit different, so we'll have to make some custom lines for that. And then that's really about it. We're just going to go ahead and jump into it. All right, so now we're all ready to go ahead and we're going to get the intake out of the way. Just so it's out of the way, it's easier to access the crank pulley bolt down there. We're going to go ahead and take this coil pack cover off. This fresh air line going to the valve cover. And the coil packs and the spark plugs underneath. So far what we got is spark plug socket, some locking and extensions. I always like the locking extensions to do the spark plugs. That way the socket itself doesn't ever get stuck on the plug. We have an 8 mil and a 10 mil, a 5 millimeter Allen. Now, unless you have this particular coil pack set up on your car, you might not need that Allen. I like using a little impact driver. The 19 mil is to turn the crank over. I also have a 3/8 adapter, just in case I want to zip the spark plugs out, but I tend to do them by hand. Leak down gauge set. Make sure you have an air compressor that runs between 100 and 110 psi. If your air compressor drops below 100 psi, this will not read properly. Then I also have a TDC indicator kit. You can use the whistle to find when you're in compression stroke. With the Honda engines, it's a 4-cylinder. It's either going to be 1 or 4 or 2 or 3. So and mainly I'm using this kit for this thing right here. And you stick it down in the spark plug hole, and when the piston comes up, you'll see this rise, and it's a good way to know that you're at TDC. So we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, so for the leak down, what I got is in cylinder 4, which is the furthest one from the timing cover, the front of the engine, I have this spring deal here. When the piston comes up, it's going to push this up, letting me know that the piston's up top. Now if you see back there, you can see that it's up already. So cylinder 4 and 1, because they go up at the same height, are at TDC right now. In cylinder 1, I have the leak down compression hose. Similar to this, just a different thread. It has a seal at the bottom, so it gives a good seal. And then I'll hook up the leak down gauge to this and to the air compressor hose. Now I did turn this over already, and I do know that it's actually on the compression stroke for cylinder 4. So we're going to turn it 360 degrees so that when the pistons come back up, it's going to be on the compression stroke for number 1. I can hear it by putting my thumb over this, and it builds pressure, and when I release my thumb, you'll hear it puff out the pressure. So the idea here is I want to turn the engine just past a little bit so that I see the rod actually going back down, and then I kind of back into it and back over it. And you kind of go back and forth until you think that you're at the exact top dead center. Because if you don't, when you load the pressure into here, it could rotate the engine. And then you got to rotate it all back around again. Alright, and you always start with the leak down tester backed all the way down. Helps if you turn the air pressure on. What you want to do is you want to back it off every time, every cylinder, and then you want to turn it until it reaches exactly 100 psi on this gauge. And by doing that each time, you know that you're resetting the 0 on the leak side perfectly. If this is over, this will read healthier. If this is under, it could read more damage. So right now we're sitting at 15%, which is just about perfect. You're looking at anywhere from 10 to 20% is pretty spot on. Less than 10 is amazing, but most stock engines, you just won't see that kind of leak down. Really well-built, high-performance engines, when they're new, just broken in, you'll see less than 10%. All right, so right now, we got 15% on number 1. So we're gonna go ahead and back the gauge down and record that number. And you can record that number on a piece of paper, you can tape it, you can do whatever you want. A lot of people do it many different ways. So at 15%, I'm not really going to go hunting for where it's leaking out. I think if it's above 20, I may open the throttle body, I may go stick my ear in the back of the exhaust pipe, look for stuff like that. You can pull the oil cap off and hear it come out of there as well. So the firing order for these engines is 1,
3, 4, 2. So after number 1, if you're rotating it clockwise, rotating it this way, number 3 is going to be your next cylinder. So we're going to stick this in number 2 hole. And you got to replace the gaskets often on these tubes as well. I've seen guys that have had the same tubes for 15 years and never replaced a gasket on it, and the gasket leaks 5%, 10%. So you really want to make sure that that is nice and clean as well. All right, so I got that swapped over. So it should be able to rotate the crankshaft 180 degrees. And at 180 degrees, what you'll see is this come all the way to the top. You'll hear the air come out of number 2. You might not hear the air, unfortunately. Okay. And again, you see me kind of go past it when it goes down, and I'm going to back off and then come back into it. Alright, so it looks like my air compressor is stopping at about 98 psi right now. It would show 10%. So this being lower, this would read a little bit lower than where it actually was. So it being at 10% would mean that it's closer to 9 or 8%. So we'll go ahead and back that off. And I'm just going to mark it down as 10. Again, this is an engine that lost oil pressure, so it's got to come apart anyways. What I'm doing really is checking the health of those cylinders, because this doesn't have iron sleeves. It's a coated sleeve. So it's very important for the block itself to be healthy, to have a good seal, for us to be able to resurface it a little bit, just a light hone, to have some new rings and new pistons to seal properly. So we're going to mark cylinder 3 at, I'm going to put an about sign 10%, and the about sign is just there to kind of let me know, 98 psi, and I might even just mark 98 psi underneath. So 1, 3, 4. 4 is the next one. So we're going to put the compression gauge in 4. Get another 180 degrees. You see it come up, go past it a smidge, back, and come back into it. So now we're stopping at about 97 psi. And we see just under 10. So again, I'll just mark this one as 10. This engine's very healthy so far. It's a shame it lost oil pressure. I need to turn the pressure setting up on my air compressor so that it shuts off at about 120, 130 psi because right now it's only shutting off just after 100, so it won't maintain 100 without running, obviously. So, all right, the last cylinder is going to be number 2. So we'll put the lift in 3, compression gauge in 2. There's also a good time when you're doing stuff like this that you can look down at your timing marks on your engine too and make sure that those are still lined up properly. Alright, and the last one. So we're stopping at 96 psi, and this one's at 10% as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and record that, and we'll probably pull the oil filter out and just give it a quick check as well. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and pull the oil filter and cut it apart and inspect the filter element itself. Hopefully this one comes off. Not too much of a fight, doesn't look like it. If you haven't bought one of these spider jaw quick filter adapters to get them off, you need to. It hasn't been started in so long. I'd imagine there's a reasonable amount that drain back, but we want to try and save as much as possible in the filter to inspect some oil. We'll take it over here. What I like to have is 2 bags, your oil filter cutter, and a paper towel set up. So we'll get this all set up here. There we go. And in the first bag, I like to try and dump the oil into. You're not going to get it all because there's always going to be some in between the shell and the filter element that there's a drain back rubber seal, drain back valve that will stop that from really coming through there. One thing I hate about these tools is they only work good upside down, because obviously if you don't do it upside down, it's just going to leak oil everywhere. So what I like doing is getting it nice and flat, tightening it up a little bit, and then I pick up the assembly. And you just want to score it the first time around. You want to be loose and kind of score it a little tighter. You go tiny turns. The more patient you are with this, the better the result. You go too fast and you'll just crush it. If you can't get a good grip on the filter, take some acetone or brake clean, which I'm about to do right now. You give the bottom of the filter a quick little acetone bath and your glove, and then everything just becomes super sticky and easy to work with. You can hear it start to cut. You just kind of work it back and forth until you get it open. And if you do it perfect, it won't kink, but unfortunately it looks like I kinked it a little. We'll see if it still comes apart. This is the drain back valve. So this valve stops oil from leaving the filter when you shut the engine off. Oh, still got lucky. So the filter element came out real nice and clean. Always do this on a bench top that you don't care about getting oil on. Okay. I do see some shinies down in there, so we're definitely going to pour this out. We'll pour this out into bag number 2. Make sure I got no oil on my hands this time. Trying not to make a mess. I like everything clean and mess free if I'm able to avoid making a mess. All right. Oh yeah. I definitely see what we're looking for. Sadly, I don't have a flashlight, so we will see if I can capture this in other ways. Oh yeah, you can see it. See on the right-hand side there, all those bronze particles. You can see, oh yeah, up there at the, see the, to the right, and then again to the right. So really at this point, that's all bearing material. So he said when he lost oil pressure, he was pretty confident that he heard some knocking. So I would agree with his statement. The cylinders are healthy. The leak down was very good, but we clearly see material inside this filter. At this point, it's kind of pointless to cut the filter apart, but I'll do it just to show an example. Maybe not. I don't know where my alpha knife is. So you take a razor blade and you just want to score the filter until you get to the bar. There's always a metal bar on the inside. So you just want to go all the way around and then do the same on both sides. This normally doesn't cut all the way through unless you got a good long sharp alpha blade. Regular razor blades do work, but they just don't work as good. And as I'm cutting, there's just a ton of material coming out of this thing. Oh, this is a steel reinforced filter. Interesting. Or plastic, I'm sorry. It's got a plastic reinforcement in there. So it's making it a tad more difficult. I typically only use wicks or Canon filters. This is some kind of pure later. So there we go. Ah yes, and the whole thing's reinforced, of course. So then at that point you're gonna have to cut it very good all the way around. That's actually pretty nice for as cheap as filter as this is. But you guys get the point on what you would do from this point. So you're just gonna keep cutting all the way around. You can see this reinforcement on this particular brand filter. Here is the results there. No sense of pulling the rest of the filter apart. This tells enough of a story that chances are rods are damaged, crankshaft's damaged, but the pistons, the bores are healthy. So he shut it off when he noticed the noise and lack of oil pressure. All right, so the other day we finished up out here inspecting the oil filter, doing the leak down. Camera went dead, of course, so it kind of cut me off as to what I was saying. When he was at the track last, he did get a chance to shut it down as soon as possible. And
that may have saved the cylinders and the pistons and allowing this engine to get rebuilt. This engine has fiber reinforced metal cylinders, so these FRM cylinders, and so there's no iron sleeves in there, so it's super important. You don't have a lot of room to hone and bore, so it's super important that the cylinders themselves are in great shape. Now, according to the leak down, it looks like they're going to be in great shape. So at this point, we're just thinking that the rod bearings are probably trashed, crank bearings are probably trashed. Hopefully not too much metal got up into the cylinder head area where the lost motion assembly is and where the camshaft journals are, stuff like that. Your timing components as well too. Your cam gear has oil inside of it. It's controlled by oil. It's how it clocks back and forth to change the cam timing. So all that stuff will have to be taken apart and inspected as well. We're going to start pulling the engine here shortly today, and we're going to go from there. I'll blog that whole process as well. We'll go through the whole process of pulling the engine, pulling it apart. Some of it just might be a time lapse. Some of it, you know, maybe I'll talk along the way if I find something, but you guys are going to be along for this whole build process. We're going to go ahead and rebuild this engine or possibly replace it with a different engine, and then we're going to go ahead and put a turbo on it. We have a Garrett GTX 3076R Gen 1 billet wheel ball bearing turbo. It has a Tile 0.82 AR exhaust housing. We have a Haltech Elite for the vehicle. We have Tile wastegate and blow-off valve. We have a bunch of vibrant components. Most of the materials will all be vibrant. We have a Canton oil pan that has to go on, and I'm sure a long list of other things. I think we're going to do a V-mount setup, so we're going to do a radiator intercooler V-mount on the car. And then it has a, I believe, an HKS exhaust that's going to stay. It's 3-inch, I believe. So it's going to be our winter project, and I really appreciate you guys following along. This is my start of my YouTube journey. I've been doing this for this kind of work and, you know, working on cars and fabricating for close to 18 years now. So doing the internet stuff's going to be interesting for me, and I really appreciate anybody that follows along and enjoys it and maybe learns some things along the way. We'll probably do some video game stuff. I'm a big nerd, so, you know, I love playing video games. I watch anime, and that's kind of where the nerdy AF comes from. This is more of a passion project for me. I'm a family guy first, and I just want to do things that I love now, and that's what we're going to be doing. So thank you guys for following along. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you soon.